Welcome, everybody. I think Paige has got a scheduling conflict today. And give me just a second here. Okay, I printed off a whole bunch of copies of the agenda for the last meeting. Does anybody have a copy of the agenda for this meeting with them?
Well, I did, but it must
Okay.
be back on my kitchen table.
I will do it from memory.
I'm pretty sure I forgot it.
We're gonna start with this. Thank you very much.
Somebody's efficient.
This didn't used to happen to me when I was actually working for
Yeah,
a living. I was a
me
lot
too.
more. I was a lot more together. To the members of the committee, I previously circulated draft minutes for our previous three meetings, those being a regular meeting, or actually initial meeting on October the 5th, a special meeting on November the 2nd, and a regular meeting on November the 9th. And I'd like to know if there are any changes, corrections, additions, deletions, modifications that you want to propose to any of those minutes.
I had none.
And if not, I'll hear a motion to approve those minutes.
I move we approve as presented.
Okay?
I'll second.
And a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, the minutes for those three meetings are approved. Before we get into the rest of the published agenda, I'd like to add an item to the agenda for which I will need a motion. And the item is a discussion, consideration, and recommendation on a proposed ADECA project grant that I'm going to let Sherry Lee explain. But suffice to say, I'd like to add to the agenda discussion of an ADECA proposed grant for $500,000, of which the city would pay $100,000 and the grant would be for $400,000. Can I hear a motion to add that to the agenda?
I move that we add that to the agenda as
All right.
read.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
It's added to the agenda, and we'll start with that. Sherry Lee, if you would.
And Richard's gonna
And Richard,
join me.
thank you very much.
I brought copies just for the record, just so you kind of know. ADECA, on a regular basis, makes funding available through their recreational trails program for the grant. It is based upon what you're proposing to do for a multi-use trail. And just so you know, in that world of definition, a multi-use trail is a sidewalk type system of a sufficient width that jogging, walking, cyclists could all use it, but they say non-motorized, so it would not be for golf carts or anything like that. And in that case, the total project funding for the ratio of 80% grant, 20% match is up to a $500,000 project, meaning that the maximum grant would be $400,000. If this was to go forward and we went to bid and it comes out at $383,000, they're only going to match 80% of that. So so it's not like you're guaranteed $400,000. It's going to be based upon what the actual bid prices open up at. There is a hidden cost, but we need to be honest about it. Luckily, we have the ability in-house to do all of the production required to apply for the grant without using a consultant or engineer or anything of that nature. If we were awarded a grant, we have to have it engineered. And that cost is not covered by the grant. So it would be 20% match plus any required survey and engineering to get a packet out to a contractor for public bid. So
Would that be, what, in the range of 15% of the project cost? Is that what you're
usually
thinking?
the maximum that you see for both the survey design and the A&E, the CE and I at the end, is around that 15%. This is not complex construction for a trail system, so that's probably going to be a little lower than that, probably closer to 12%. And for example, I believe this one has on the back, well, they pay the backside amount, but it has to, I may have said that right. I think they give you 10% for engineering survey, period. So if it's more than that, I'll have to go back and reread it. I keep forgetting that the TAP grant, we have to do all engineering.
I know. We have a lot in the works, a lot of grants.
The
addressing-
mechanics of the payment, if I could interrupt one more time.
Sure.
The mechanics of the payment, I'm assuming, is that we do the work and incur the expense, and then we get reimbursed. So
That's-
we essentially float the cash and then get
Mhm.
reimbursed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
What's the time period?
It's due quickly, and they actually moved up
You're talking about
there.
for reimbursement?
Oh,
Usually, as soon as the project starts, if you process a pay request and you pay that contractor that pay request, as soon as you've got a canceled check, you can submit for reimbursement.
Right.
And then it's the state of Alabama, which is 60 to 90 days where you get paid back. So, but you
So
can.
pretty typical grant
Yes.
funding, okay.
Yes. The area that we're looking in, we're still perfecting that, but the North Beach Park has no trails in it at all. If you remember, the South Beach is just intertwined with sidewalks and things of that nature, and that's been an identified concurrent complaint and concern is that a lot of people use the park road system for the jogging and the running and cycling, and most of it is one direction. And when there's a car trying to use that road at the same time, somebody's stepping off the road or whatever. And our proposal will be to the council that we consider going after retrofitting the roads and adding a single, multi-use trail that basically mimics the same circular path and comes back around, so you'll have a walking, jogging, bicycling trail that is separate from the actual road system. I think that would be a great amenity in addition to that park, and it kind of falls right into the scope, because this is a recreational trail grant. You can't do sidewalks, roadside, or anything like that. It has to be in a park or a natural setting. It can't be.
So we're talking down by the pier?
right down
Yeah,
by
okay.
the duck pond and
Yeah,
everything. We get a
okay.
lot of complaints from people that run or walk in that area, and I don't know if y'all have done that, but
yeah.
I used to run there every day and end up jumping up into the kudzu every time a car would pass, or, take on the geese, one or the other. But we've received a lot of complaints about it, and then we have been observing, and, I go down in the evenings and watch, in the afternoons and watch people walk, and based on the complaints, just kind of doing observations. But there really is no room. I mean, there's no room for a car and a pedestrian down there. It's
I
not
hadn't
safe.
thought about that, but I guess that is right. You got to walk on the road.
I've had the same experience.
So, that's true.
With Sherry Lee, and even though the speed limit is very constrained down there, and most people pretty much pay attention to that, still in all it's dangerous, particularly for footing, because if you get off the road or if the weather's inclement,
Mhm.
it's very treacherous.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and people
I would
have
agree.
had incidents where they almost come back into traffic. It's very dangerous.
And it's much more conducive right now to vehicular traffic, but we have all those treasured trees that are labeled, and you don't really feel like you can walk around and enjoy, which is really the purpose of that nature
Yeah,
trail.
That's true.
And
Okay.
And just for, kind of mental calculation, there's only $2.6 million available statewide for this particular grant. And generally, it's about a 25% chance. That's what I've kind of learned through my experiences, that you've got about every 4 years you get lucky and get one. So this is not like a TAP grant where we have a pretty high percentage of winner. This is put it out there. If we get it, great, we pursue it. If we don't, we have it offered for next year to consider again. So, and the one nice thing that ADECA does is that you cannot apply for one of these grants if you still have an unclosed one from prior years, and they purposely make it it take 2 years to close one out, so they kind of keep it thinned out. So we're primed as being a candidate to be able to make this application.
Do you have discretion on the engineering and the placement of these? You're not constrained by somebody in Montgomery saying this is where we want you to put the trail?
Here's the lucky thing. One thing I like about ADECA as opposed to those managed through ALDOT, the only thing they're reviewing is to make sure all the boilerplate languages and contracts and specifications, they really let the local community design in the way that they want. And since it's not a highway or anything like that, there's not all these federal or state construction standards and guidelines that you have to meet. So, no, the review of, if we are successful and we get together a set of drawing specifications, the only thing they're looking is to make sure that their required language is in the specs, not anything to do with the design.
Do you intend, if you get the grant and you can go forward, do you intend to open up to the public ideas, suggestions on how to lay it out and so forth? Because we have a lot of people who
Absolutely.
I know would enjoy participating.
I think
in
it'd be a
that.
great
And it would be
opportunity
a
for
lot of
public.
buy-in.
It'd be a great opportunity for public engagement. I do think there's also, and I believe I put it in my email, an opportunity to look at some stormwater management techniques down there too. We do have some issues down toward the end of which we've walked several times that I think we can kill two birds, no pun intended, with one stone.
I think you can kill as
Sorry.
many-
Two geese, you could have said geese.
Yeah. Kill as many as you can find. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right, before they get the cats.
Do not write that. So,
Do you think the 500 is enough to complete the multi-use trail around the park?
I really do, because they've upped that number. It used to be considerably lower than that. Yeah, I think you can do a real nice one. Now, one of the things, and I'm glad they even have some specific language that's included in there, is it doesn't have to be a hard surface, even though they have a ton of language about ADA compliant, and many of the stakeholders have mentioned that they would prefer a softer touch as far as environmental impact and things of that nature. And
there's some really neat surfaces now that serve dual
does an
purpose.
accessible trail have to be paved? No, as long as the surface is firm and stable. So I refer to the material as chert. You see it in a lot of beach communities and stuff. It's an aggregate that has a lot of fines that really you roller compact in place,
Yeah.
and it feels good, it looks good, it stays pretty much in place, but it's a lot more park appropriate than just having
And it's-
what looks like
it's
a golf
pervious.
And
course.
it, yeah,
It's
it's pervious, exactly.
And, you know, I think there'll be some areas that there may be low-rise boardwalk used to deal with some of the terrain that's 8 foot wide. Maybe just have to have the kick rail as long as it's no more than 30 inches off grade. You don't have to have handrails on it, but just to, yes, I think you build a lot of trail for
That was my next question, talking about the
500,000.
engineering. Is that something you think we can do in-house on a trail like that?
I think we can. We'd probably have to sub out some survey work, because that's the one thing that
Right.
I don't have the equipment or the ability to do.
But as far as construction of the trail with, you know, like you said, well elevated walkway or whatever,
Yeah.
it certainly could be.
Yeah, there's a good chance that, and, you know, and really the construction oversight, I think we definitely can do in-house, even if we had to farm out some of the design just to get it ready to go. But the nice thing about how Fairhope is already set up is we can produce contract documents. We do it every day, so that's harder than doing the drawings, is getting all the boilerplate together and, you know, everything where it needs to be. So yes, I think we can maximize this.
So are we, if you do that kind of surface that you're talking about, and we get a gully washer, toad strangler, whatever you want to call it, is it going to be more susceptible to washout than concrete, asphalt?
I mean, those are
I mean,
considerations.
you don't want to do,
yeah.
you wouldn't want to have to rebuild this thing after every,
And that
Major
may be
rain.
part of the final design consideration. That part of the trail that's farthest to the east may could be that material, and maybe that trail that has the most exposure may need to be a porous concrete or something like that.
Okay.
It's not necessarily the rainfall, it's a storm surge issue that
Yeah,
I'd be worried
yeah.
about. I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's-
think the hard surface compacted aggregate trail can handle rainfall. It's if we got waves breaking and going, that's where but it'll tear up
But we-
asphalt and concrete too. So.
We would do our research on that
okay. I
thoroughly.
So
but
we're
yeah.
looking at the city's part, 150,000?
Worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what this committee needs to consider and make a recommendation is, you know, I know it's always tough with grants, that if the grant wasn't available, would we build a project? Probably not, even though we'd like to continue to think about a project of this nature to add that amenity to that park. But if we can get the grant, does it make it, having the value of 20 cents on the dollar, is it a good financial decision? That's, you know, people like Sherry and Lee and I, we see those grants and we're like kids in the candy store. We see no downside to it, but there, you know, there's always is a cost associated with it, but we get more than $150,000 worth of value out of it.
One other question. Am I correct in assuming that since we're using public money to build the trail, then are we constrained, limited in saying, well, because we've used public money, then we cannot charge for anybody who wants to use the trail? Is that correct?
That is a good question, actually.
Because you have, and I don't know.
Yeah, I
know-
actually-
See, when I walk in the
that's a
morning,
really good
I'm always
question.
early and there's nobody in the hut. But I know on some occasions when I've gone during the day, I get a dirty look if I just sort of walk through.
Yeah.
Because they want to know. And I think we have to clarify so that, not that we have to do it here, but I'm
No, but I'll
pointing
call
out
ADECA tomorrow and
that,
clarify.
well, it ought to be a policy issue that the
Mhm.
council also weighs in
Sure.
on as to whether or not you want to charge pedestrians who want to walk through there.
Right, because, well, and it is still public, but it would be public, let's say, free to the public that are citizens of Fairhope that have the sticker.
Because I
and-
know at the airport, you had limitations when you
Mm-hmm.
accepted certain kinds of grant money for
Right.
certain things. You could not charge for those, for people to
That's a
use
good
that
point.
facility.
Yeah.
And I think you need to have that
Absolutely,
clarified.
that's a great point. Thank you.
And I know I've dealt with this question before in this sense, is that you have a large public park complex that has sports fields associated with it, and you get a trail grant, and it has trails that wind through it.
Mhm.
Well, there are occasions that the city would lease that sports complex out to a travel ball team or whatever, and they would close the gate and collect at the gate.
Mhm.
And I think the threshold is as long as that wasn't a paid activity 365, if it was just for seasonal or special events, then I think you were okay. So it's in the sense is there's no cost to use the beaches during the non-high
That's right.
season. It's only during the
But-
warmer
But
months.
Mhm.
during the warmer
I
months,
think
there is
we're
a charge.
okay.
Right.
And the fact
We'll
that
check.
citizens whose technical taxpayer dollars are matching it
Are
do
paying
not
for
pay
it.
because they have the ability to get a
The
pass
sticker.
that gets them in. So
Mhm.
I think we'll be okay, but
But
it
if
would
you're
be-
walking, you don't have a sticker. I can
Right.
guarantee you that. My
Right.
sticker's stuck in my car.
Never thought
It's
about
the, it's the ongoing
So.
debate
it-
for the
it doesn't-
North
it-
Beach.
That's way too much detail for this
Yeah,
meeting. I'm just
sure.
bringing it up as something.
No,
I
it's
think I'd like
good.
to look at.
I appreciate
This is
that.
Engagement with the bike ped committee, you know, it kind of fits right in there.
That's-
I already reached out to Meredith to talk to her about it on Monday, the 3rd, I think is their
All
next
right.
meeting.
For those of you, Will and Tim, who haven't been involved in this particular part of the process for the financial committee, the way it was set up 4 or 5 years ago, and the way it is set up this time also, is that the council passed a resolution saying that if there are any out-of-budget items, capital items, that over a certain amount of money, that those items have to be brought, first of all, to the financial committee for evaluation and a recommendation, not necessarily on the merits of whether or not you want a bike trail, because that's or a recreational trail, because that's a political decision that the council will ultimately rule on. But it's supposed to be brought, first of all, to the financial committee to say, is this more or less a good deal financially, and if we do it, can we afford it, and is it a reasonable use of funds from a financial perspective? So what we, unless there are any other questions for Sherry, Lee, or Richard, what we're really tasked to do is we can have further discussion if necessary. Otherwise, it would be appropriate to consider a recommendation that we do or we don't think that this is a financially sound project with a good goal worthy of the money, and that we would pass it along for what it's worth with our recommendation to City Council, and then they have the ultimate say-so on it. But this is a step
Gotcha.
that has to be gone through first.
Sound like pretty good use of funds to me.
is
20
that-
cents,
is that a
20 cents on the
motion?
dollar, yeah.
Is
I'd
that a
move-
motion to-
What would have to be, a
It would be
motion to approve?
A motion that the financial committee has duly considered the recreational trails program project and believes that within the constraints presented, that it would be a fiscally sound and good use of money if we went forward, and that we recommend it to City Council.
Do I
Is
have to
what
say
you
that
did?
all again?
Is
That's
that-
what I
is
meant
that
to
just
say.
what you said?
Yeah, that's what I meant to say, Chuck.
Right.
So, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and did I hear a second?
I hear a second.
All right, is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd
Just
like.
as a footnote, there's a probably good chance that money wouldn't probably be spent until we were in fiscal 19, because it does
Right.
take
Take
that
that
long to
long.
get to that point. It's a process.
Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would
And-
be a really nice project for Fairhope.
So,
And if I may just do a second
Yeah,
footnote.
sure.
We're not going to continually just keep going after grants endlessly. I think all these grants that we're going after are based on things that were either identified through studies in the past that have been done. And my least favorite thing is when a study sits on a shelf and nobody does anything with it, especially if it's a sound study. It makes a lot of sense and everyone has bought into it, and, you know, community council at that time or in current leadership and council. And then the other thing is some citizen community priorities, things that we've heard either through the ACE process that happened a few years ago, or that we're hearing regularly through our committee meetings and things like that. So just so you know, there is a method to the madness of going after these. It's not just, I know Richard did say we're like kids on Christmas, and that is true when they come down, but they're very strategic and we are thoughtful about going after them. So just want to put that out there. We're gonna-
Okay, well, when you decide to put this on the city council agenda, you should make a note that this was reviewed and approved on such and so a date by the Financial Advisory Committee.
We certainly will.
I think our goal is to work session at
Okay.
the first meeting of January. And this one doesn't necessarily require a resolution, but I should do like having a council resolution to support that, just adds weight to the application.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
it does.
All right.
Thank you all.
All right, well, thank you for
Yeah,
coming.
thank
We
you.
appreciate
Merry
it.
Christmas.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Merry
All right,
Christmas.
take care. Before we go into the next agenda items, I want to, since Robert is here, ask him the question: is there anything else that you or what you think the other city council members might like from the financial committee relative to the proposed budget?
No, the only thing, you know, I know you'd mentioned to the mayor about pulling out, you know, the capital projects, sewer,
Yes.
utility projects out of the budget. I don't know if that's been done yet. However, that to me is what the priority task for y'all should be, is looking at where millions of dollars can be pulled from reserves, what account, and other options for financing this sewer upgrade, electrical upgrade, and other upgrades that we know are coming.
Yeah, here.
We're prepared to do it, we just want y'all's expertise as
Yeah.
far as the most responsible way to finance it.
Exactly. Well, yeah, on that topic, and we are going to talk about that in just a minute, but I've had conversations a couple of times with the mayor on splitting that out. In fact, it was discussed at one of our previous meetings here when the mayor was here,
Yeah.
and she agreed to it. And I've heard several individual council members, not in a group, but, you know, talking to individuals who also think it's a good idea. So I'm just sort of taking it as written, that when the final budget is done, that will be pulled out. That seems to be the decision, and that's the assumption that I'm going to work on here in just a minute. Unless you have a problem with that'll be the prescription.
And I missed the last meeting, but did the council address that at all? I mean, as far as
Address.
those projects within the budget, or
No.
we hadn't even gotten
No.
there yet?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Okay.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is discussion of new projects, meaning new for us, the financial committee, to get into. So this is really about setting our agenda for the next couple of months. And based on the discussions we had when we talked about the budget one or two meetings ago, based on the priority sheet we discussed, and based on feedback I've had from both the mayor and some of the council members, I think that these may not be the ultimate two most important, but they're certainly both of them within the top 3 or 4 projects that I think we ought to be addressing, and I think we can multitask on this. One of the projects is that in the budget, and I know in previous budgets, there have been discussions on and off for several years about the whole police jurisdiction thing.
Yeah.
And it is, on the one hand, a financial question, on the other hand, it's a political question. And we're not going to address the political aspects of it, but I think that we should look at the dollar impacts of it. I know the mayor presented some numbers at one of our meetings on her take on what money would be saved if the jurisdiction were cut back, what funds we would and what funds we would not receive. But I don't know that we've really had anything firm on what really would we cut in cost, if any, from the police department. If we shrunk it, would we keep the department in its current size or not? What's the chief's opinion on that? How do we really know what the numbers are? I know we get some revenue from the police jurisdiction outside the city limits.
From who? From who?
Comes indirectly through the sales tax, I think, doesn't it, Robert?
From the county?
Is it sales tax or property tax?
I don't know. Jack,
Sir,
you
Hey, Jack.
glad you're here.
I just came in on 2 wheels from Montgomery, sorry I'm late.
Okay. Talking about the police jurisdiction,
Police jurisdiction, we collect, if you are outside the city limits but in the police jurisdiction, we collect half of the sales tax that we would normally collect. So we collect a penny instead of 2 pennies. We also collect half the lodging tax that we would normally collect. So the glaring example of that would be the Grand Hotel and all the entities affiliated with that would pay half of the normal sales tax. But if we withdraw the police jurisdiction, they would not be in the police jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And that would result in, by some estimates, $1.5 million a year of lost revenue.
yeah.
Just that one entity.
Well, and then there's also the issue, as we had, for example, when Walmart came in,
Correct.
where they came in, but outside the city,
Right.
inside the PJ. And then when we implemented the sales tax, that was a big number. Even half
Correct.
was a big number.
Correct.
And now that they're in the city, it's a really big number.
Right.
And so if we shrink the PJ back, and then tomorrow some other big box comes in just outside the city limits and builds, we get no revenue for that.
Correct.
Now, granted,
Yeah.
we don't have to provide the police service, but that's a big piece of revenue to miss out. So, since it always seems to come up every 2 or 3 years, what are the real numbers involved in all of this? I thought we'd take a look at it from a financial point of view. And what I was hoping for would be, Will, if you and Paige would take that on as your project and try to get your arms around both the current finances, projections, if we cut back, but we didn't cut back expense, or if we did cut back expense, can we really cut back what we're losing in terms of revenue?
Well, let me ask you this, in reality, you wouldn't deny service.
Well, no, it wouldn't be a question of denying. What happens is, as I understand the mechanics of it, that if the city decided to shrink the PJ, then they would go to the Baldwin County Sheriff and say, this is what we're going to be doing. And then they would negotiate a turnover date, and then on X date, the Sheriff's Department would take over the police functions in that area. So it's not like people wouldn't get any policing, but they would just get it from a different source.
Or would they?
Please?
Fairhope wouldn't respond if they were called.
Well, only if they were called
That'd
to
be
assist
some group, yeah,
by
with the
the
sheriff.
Sheriff's Department. 911 calls would go to the Sheriff's Department, not to the Fairhope Dispatch, things like that.
That's a lot of revenue to make up from expense reduction.
If I may interject, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman,
Yeah.
you can't make it up. you know, what you did was they lassoed that and got that Grand Hotel and the PJ, and, you know, they knew what the revenue was, and so if people say they're getting a discount, so what? It still was such a, you know, such an income producer, even half, that it made sense to do it.
Well, I'd like to just get it all out on the table so that we can, so that everybody can look at the numbers and everybody can shake their head and say, you know, it's a really close call, or it's a no-brainer, and then we can move on with our lives. I just don't want to have it keep coming up
Yeah.
every other year and being an issue, because it was an issue this year. It was an issue
Couple
3 or
of
4 years
wasn't it?
ago.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, I remember that.
So, if you would. And then the other one is the one Robert alluded to on going one by one through the 4 utilities and taking that initial list that we have from Richard. I have a whole bunch of stuff from Richard Peterson, right?
Yes.
Peterson, on the proposed projects. And I think the task is to, first of all, go sit down with Richard, and this would be something you and I would do,
Okay.
and say, okay, this is what it says, but is this really all of it? Is there more? Is there less? What are the plus and minus? What's the 2 sigma, 3 sigma on the project cost, that kind of thing? And then sit down and say, really do an analysis of what really are we generating in free cash flow, how much of it is expected to go over to fund the city operations, how much of it can we keep, and can we, if we do this project, can we finance it out of cash flow? Do we have to borrow? If we do have to borrow some or all of it, what's the best way to do that?
Right.
Terms, conditions, all that kind of thing. And I thought with your background in mind, that's probably a pretty good task for us.
Okay.
And I also thought that the simplest way to do this, so we didn't get overwhelmed with everything, is to just do them one at a time. And the simplest one, to my thinking, is to take on the gas department first, because that seems to be about as straightforward as it's going to be. And then once we kind of get comfortable with not just an answer that we might get, but also with the routine we use to get it, then we would go and do the other ones one by one.
Yeah,
We look
sounds
at
good.
them one by one. If it comes down to borrowing, it may be more efficient to borrow for all of them at one time.
Yeah, exactly.
But in terms of analysis, I think it's a lot simpler to do.
Yeah,
one by
because they're all
one.
different, so.
Well,
You want us to look at this from the revenue side only?
Revenue and expense. Revenue and expense, because there were certain statements made in one of these previous meetings from the mayor about the money we would save if we got rid of the police jurisdiction. And I don't know if that's, That's her
You want us to
opinion.
use those budget costs?
no, I want you to sit down with the chief and talk to
Okay.
him, and, you know, I want to try and push everything back to the source.
Okay.
Now, do we ever get that straight, that it's okay for us to talk to these people?
We're going to talk to them until advised otherwise.
Okay, all right.
I have friends.
Okay. Friends in high places.
Right. So if you all are in agreement on that, I don't think we need a vote. But again, my idea is that you and Paige, and that, you know, run into any roadblocks, you're not quite sure what it is I'm asking for, you just call me up, we'll sit down and talk about it. And then you and I can get together, start pushing our way
Yeah.
through these
Okay.
others. And then, I don't know how far we'll get before the next meeting, but I at least want to have an interim report at the next meeting on what we've accomplished, even if we haven't finished anything.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Because I think those,
That's a good idea.
particularly the big projects that are capital intensive, that are, we know are probably in the $20-25 million range, that's the elephant in the room, and we have to start working on that.
Yep.
You want me to inform Paige?
Yes, please,
Okay.
if you would, yeah. Does that meet with your approval? Okay. And then the last item on the agenda is public participation. You're the only public here. Do you want to participate?
Okay, let me just bust out some thoughts on things that were on the agenda.
Yeah, please.
On the North Beach Trail, the entire downtown district, essentially,
Mhm.
drains to the bluff area over the North Beach Park.
Mhm.
There is some runoff that would go to the Stacks Gully to the south, or to the Big Mouth Gully to the north. But most of that stuff comes to Bayview on the bluff,
Bayview and, is it Oak that comes in?
on the north end. of
Yeah, I know
South.
where you mean, yeah.
On the south, it's
Yeah.
Magnolia
Yeah.
and Fairhope.
Mhm.
There's an awful lot of stormwater that comes over that bluff or through stormwater drainage systems and is dumped into the North Beach Park. And that water carries over the street. And if you build a trail system that kind of runs parallel to the street system, it's gonna have to stand up to very heavy stormwater flows throughout the whole length of the thing. The bluff really needs to be engineered to stand up to the stormwater impacts that it gets. What's the key ingredients that's missing there is probably some kind of a tow rail system that has to go through there and stabilize the whole bottom of the bluff against soil liquefaction that occurs when that ground is saturated.
Mhm.
There's a tremendous amount of soil that comes down with every heavy rain, and it has to be cleaned off the road. The problem is not so much the storm surge problem, it's the regular thunderstorm, stormwater runoff problem that really tears that place up. So I think that this problem of installing a trail system down there that's gonna stand up to these conditions is more complicated than is being estimated. I think you got a bigger problem there.
You got a road now, right?
Yeah. The road is covered with sand all the time.
Just scoop it off, I guess.
Well, if you put in a pedestrian and bicycle trail and some of it.
I don't disagree with you, Gary. I think,
Complicates.
that trail needs to be asphalt, in my opinion, worrying about being pervious, it's right there on the bay, runoff is gonna go to the bay. So, I mean, trying to reduce stormwater is a moot point to me, where it's located. And two, like, storm surge and everything else, if the roads can handle it, you need a trail that's gonna handle it as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
So, And you do have that excessive stormwater runoff that comes from the bluff and other, pipe drainage systems that spit out there. Even just, it was a presentation for a Decker grant, for the trail on North Beach.
Another factor that wasn't considered at all is the effect of, it's a heavily wooded area. Tree roots are gonna have quite an effect on any kind of a trail system that you put in there. Along Greeno, multi-use trails were installed on both sides of Greeno over the years. And the impact of the tree system that was planted along Greeno on that trail, which is a concrete sidewalk-like structure, has been very dramatic. It is a constant maintenance headache. And because of the uneven joint problem that results, the thing is really a kind of a menace to pedestrians and people that are disabled especially, some of which use that trail.
So you're against trails now, is that what you're saying?
No.
I'm saying that the engineering problem is much bigger than you
I
were
walk,
talking about.
I walk, as you know, because we see one another every so
Yeah.
often. I walk that area
You've worn
every
out more
morning.
sneakers than I have.
And I can tell you that you take your life in your hands on that sidewalk.
Yes.
If you're not watching every step, you will go, because some of the gaps are like this, with no exaggeration. And
Right.
handicap access is non-existent, because you could not conceivably get any handicap device across that.
So if the idea was that the Public Works Department was gonna basically design this thing, I think that's gonna be inadequate. I don't think that they can do a successful design.
If you
for
want
such- for
to,
the
if you want
system.
to, if you want to see the problem, when we leave the meeting, we can all go out and look at the sidewalk right in front of the Nick Center, because it's as bad as any with some of that stuff.
That's a
Yeah.
maintenance issue, isn't
No, it's an engineering, you shouldn't have to have maintenance on a sidewalk like
You
that.
have to cut the trees down, it's the only way to.
I don't know that. I'm not an engineer. I don't know that there may be some better way.
The other thought I had was that regarding access by pedestrians and so on, there is a midpoint access which comes down from Bayview Avenue about midway where there's
Right,
a
steps.
public toilet,
Mhm.
right? So pedestrians can come and go and access this system. And they're not that traffic is not affected by the gatehouse.
Right.
I didn't even know that. I didn't know there's
So
a step
There's other
system.
ways to get to this than
Yeah.
through the gatehouse, where you're talking about pedestrian traffic. The other thing that I think is that the design should link this thing to the Eastern Shore Trail system. There should be a clear connection to the Eastern Shore Trail system.
Would it not, would it not have that though, just by its being, because you,
It's not complete. It's not complete.
yeah, but you would,
There's
if
some
you would,
little
if,
gaps.
if they installed this recreational trail, you could walk then to the south side and you could go up the steps by Fells and you're right there. I mean, that sidewalk on South Mobile is
Right,
the
but
trail.
it's not all multi-use path, grade connection. A lot of it's conventional sidewalk.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a multi-use path, there should be a multi-use path connection to the Eastern Shore Trail.
I don't know how you
That's-
do, I don't know how you have a multi-use connection unless you're willing to push your wheelchair up that hill. I mean,
I'm just bringing this up. Ultimately, somewhere.
I knew it
down
was a
the-
mistake to put public participation on the agenda.
Somewhere down the road, there is going to be a growing demand for multi-use path access and use throughout. This is a growing system,
Mhm.
right?
You're right.
And it all, in Fairhope especially when you're dealing with, hospitality kinds of considerations for, visitors and that kind of thing, you want a really first-class, completely interconnected, multi-use system for recreational, pedestrian, bicycle, electric, commuting, and so on. We really gotta start thinking, you have to think forward about where this is gonna go over the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I think the best place though for this input is gonna be when they do, if they do get the grant, to be part of that participation when they start laying it out. Because I think your ideas have a lot of merit, Gary.
They just pop into my head.
It's an awesome thing, yeah.
Okay. On the police jurisdiction issue,
Yeah.
the city is growing rapidly, and I think that when you look at this thing, you have to start thinking about, as the city limit expands out into things that are now in the, extraterritorial jurisdiction, what we're doing is we're making investments into things that we're going to ask to be, to annex in the future. And I think that there's a little flavor of that needs to go into this idea of police jurisdiction. We need to be ahead of where we're growing with our public services in a sense,
And that's what the police think also.
I think
It's
so.
a buffer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's just a thought that maybe you ought to go into the work that's to be done on the side, figuring out
Mhm.
what to do with this.
No, it's a great point.
But here's the reason for pulling the back, to encourage people to annex in and
Well, that's
pay the full tax.
That's everybody's theory, or no, I shouldn't say that. That is the theory of some, that is in fact an incentive. I don't necessarily subscribe to that
I
assumption.
agree with the theory.
I don't think that that's the case for most
Pulling
people.
back police and fire would encourage people to annex into the city.
No,
It's
No.
gonna make them resent the city even more. They're gonna wanna be a part of the city even less.
I disagree with that. I think it would, because they want Fairhope Police and Fire Protection. Well, I'm on the other side on that. They would, in a New York minute, they'd annex in if you pull back their police and fire.
I think, well,
Jack and I disagree on this, I know.
yeah, I think there are a lot of,
Several people you could interview.
yeah, I think there's two sides to that story, James.
Not your side.
All right,
The,
There are people on the
one
other side
more
that
item,
talk
Gary.
to as
Be
well.
quick.
one more.
Thank y'all for service, I gotta go.
Thank you, Jack.
Hey, Jack.
This is something that I thought about at the last Environmental Advisory Board meeting,
Mhm.
where we had public utilities present and talking about some of their issues, like with this sanitary sewer collection system and so on. The current administration has been in place for a little over a year, and some of the key new department heads and so on have been on board for a while, and but are still, in some ways, trying to get their feet on the ground, I think. So we're a year into a 4-year administration, and we're still trying to understand current issues that the city government faces. And we're still trying to consider the feasibility and the alternatives for all sorts of big issues that largely have to do with growth or conditions in the city that are perhaps the result of maybe a little under maintenance, under provisioning and so on. And unless the department heads are able to do the kinds of things that I used to think of when I was facing preliminary studies, feasibility studies, cost-benefit analyses, and then prioritizing your big issues and so on, in order to get these efforts properly sized up so that they get into the budget, right? The city is going to be struggling to come to grips with current issues, and even more so, the issues that the future holds or presents, right? So I hope that what we think about is providing these departments, especially Public Works, Planning, and Utilities, and others as well, the resources that they're going to need in order to understand their issues, determine the feasibility of possible approaches to their issues, and also to address the long-term growth prospects, to lay down the proper foundations. These guys need help with consulting services, evaluating design alternatives, and so on and so forth. They need resources that are not available to them in order to get where they really ought to be today. And if they don't get this kind of support, we're going to be years ahead before we really have this stuff under proper management control. So I think that they're short of what they really need to do to be doing a proper management job of the problems that they have to address. And I don't see us providing the resources and the availability of resources that they need. They're trying to do this stuff in-house. And I don't think they've got what they need in terms of time or skills, so on, to deal with it. I think they're struggling. And I think we ought to address that. We ought to take that struggle away.
How do you suggest to do that? Take it away how?
Somehow create a pool of fiscal resources, for consulting services, engineering, whatever they think they need help with. They might have the ability to do it themselves if they had the time. But in the day-to-day world of issues and unanticipated consequences and, and so on and so forth, these guys don't have the time to do the job. They're not able to do the analytical work that's necessary to consider major alternatives, to evaluate the costs and the benefits and so on. They can't do an adequate job to size this stuff up and shape it up to get it presented for the budget in a time frame that's less than multiple years. We don't need to spend the rest of this administration playing catch-up just to get to where we ought to be, because we have to address the future. We need to be laying out where we want to go 20, 30 years from now in these systems.
Sounds like we need a special counsel.
No, we don't.
We need
All right.
more, whatever
Sounds
the
like the
heck
tax
they think they're
increase.
going to put to work. It's not a matter of
Yeah.
giving it to them. It's a matter of having it available when they finally say, I need it, right?
Appreciate it.
So there has to be some kind of a bucket, a pot, or something that says, if you need consulting services, if you need architects, if you need engineers, whatever it is, to get these problems addressed, and alternatives selected, and so on and so forth, we're here to support you.
All right, Gary. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts.
Okay.
All right. We're adjourned.
Right.